Hello and welcome to the first of a three-part series on how some bad ideas of the philosophers have miseducated many people, probably including you. First up, let's clarify this myth from the philosophers, the idea that all knowledge can be verified. This is totally not true. It's totally something philosophers have taught, and it's caused a whole lot of trouble. Of course, philosophers have also corrected what they've taught. Let's see what they said and why they were wrong, how they were corrected. Now, what we're looking at here is, well, off to the side, some lovely frangipani flowers. But what we're looking at here, taking up most of the screen, is my ricochet.com post on this subject, and you can read it there yourself if you like. Let's first say that our the ideas of the philosophers, have given you nearly everything you have. What you've got from religion, math, literature, history, and geography, I think, those are independent of philosophy, but philosophers invented just about everything else, or at least we invented the people who invented them. Before a scientist invented things like your smartphone, we philosophers had to invent the scientists, so you're welcome. But philosophers have also given you the ideas that have led to nearly all the all the bad things you have to put up with. I'm so sorry. Philosophers have screwed up the entire world, or we've had the ideas or created the ways of thinking that have screwed up the entire world. Some of these bad ideas, though, have infiltrated your thinking, and you probably don't even know it. I'm talking in particular about ideas that you never even knew were bad ideas. Maybe you didn't even know they could be doubted. I'm talking about the water a fish swims in, not realizing it even exists. Ideas you pick up from television, school, social media, maybe from your parents, but ideas that originally came from philosophy, and in particular, bad philosophy. So in this series, I'm clarifying three of these ideas. And first up is the idea that all knowledge can be verified. This is just not true. Not all knowledge can be verified. And you could spend a lifetime studying why this is an error. But you can also spend 3 minutes. 3 minutes is fine. It's recommended for most people. And here's the 3-minute version. We're dealing with the error that says all knowledge can be verified, and we're explaining why that isn't true. Verifying something from experience is a logic thing. It means going from some observations on experience to some conclusion. But you can't go from the observations to the conclusion unless you have some principle by which we get to that conclusion from those observations. Simple example, we know from observation that all physical objects in the universe are affected by gravity. And that is something we know by observing things that are affected by gravity. We observe millions of things that are affected by gravity, and we conclude from that that all physical objects are affected by gravity. We observe millions and millions of physical objects that are affected by gravity. We never observe any that are not, and so we conclude all physical objects in the universe are affected by gravity. But that reasoning only works because of the principle that makes it work. Now, that principle is simply the principle that we can learn about what we have not experienced from what we have experienced. And that principle is called the principle of induction. Or you can try the principle of the uniformity of nature, which states that the fundamental laws of physics are always the same. Either principle will do as a foundation for this sort of knowledge. You can actually prove the principle of induction from the principle of the uniformity of nature, or vice versa. And you can use them to make verification from experience work. But one of those things has to be known prior to verification, because you can't do verification without it. And that's it. That is why it is a myth that all knowledge can be verified. Well, that's at least the basics. Now, this is maybe a little bit harder than your first lesson on Socrates, but this isn't my final lecture on interpreting Plato's Republic either, much less some reading from Hegel, which would just be the worst. Or if it's not, don't go to me. For heaven's sake, go to someone who enjoys Hegel more and is better with Hegel and is more experienced working with Hegel. I'm trying to not mix up the name of my undergrad logic teacher with Gregory Sadler. Gregory Sadler is the guy on YouTube who teaches Hegel. Now, there are some parallel errors. Again, these are the basics, and there's a whole lot more. And this is actually pretty simple, although maybe it's not the simplest thing in philosophy. But without doing a whole lot more, let's at least note there are a few parallel errors, like instead of all knowledge is verifiable, we can say all knowledge is empirically testable, or all knowledge is scientific, or all facts are in the realm of science, and on and on. But this idea about the verifiability of knowledge, the essential verifiability of knowledge, this is the original one. This is the one that's caused the trouble. This one and its brother principle, the verifiability criterion of meaning, which says that all known statements can be verified. And in fact, all statements that even have meaning at all can be verified, or at least to be a little more precise. I don't suppose I wrote it very precisely here. The verifiability criterion of meaning says that all statements about a world outside the mind can be verified. So it's that verifiability criterion of meaning and its derived principle, all knowledge can be verified, that are well, they're the ones that have caused most of the trouble, but there are some related principles, and you can refute all of them in the same way, just by observing that learning about the world from experience, learning about the world by verifying some beliefs, learning about the world through empirically testing things, learning about the world through science, and a number of related principles that we won't bother to formulate. Let's just go with the ones we have. Verifiability, empirical testability, science, those three things. Learning about the world in those ways relies on a principle by which we can draw conclusions from experience, conclusions about regions of reality we have never experienced, but conclusions based on what we have experienced. And you can't do that. The logic just doesn't work. Those conclusions cannot be drawn reasonably unless there is in place some principle about our ability to do that, which is in itself a principle we also know, because we don't learn anything from ignorance. We can only learn things from knowledge. And that principle is going to be one or both of the principle of induction or the principle of the uniformity of nature. Either we can learn about what we have not experienced from what we have experienced, or the fundamental laws of physics are always the same. So this idea, the verifiability criterion of meaning, and the idea that all knowledge is empirically verifiable, and some related ideas, all knowledge is empirically testable, or all true knowledge is science, these ideas come from David Hume. There's David Hume wearing that funny hat there. These ideas come from David Hume and his followers, the logical positivists. Now, the error is corrected by people who've explained the sort of thing I'm explaining in this video. I sure didn't do it first. People who understood that you need to have one of these principles in place, like induction or uniformity of nature, in order to verify anything from experience. Those are the people who have corrected this idea. Now, to be fair to Hume, he claimed that all knowledge of a world outside the mind comes from experience only, but he was a serious enough philosopher to recognize that that means that we don't actually know anything about a world outside the mind. So Hume ended with a form of skepticism. He still believes things about the world outside the mind, but he says we don't know any of them. So this idea of the this insight that the verifiability criterion of meaning and David Hume's idea that all knowledge of the world outside the mind comes from experience and experience alone, and the idea that all knowledge is verifiable, this has been corrected by a number of people, and among them I just want to name Karl Popper here and Bertrand Russell. And here is another ricochet.com post where you can look into this. Here is where I give a brief introduction to logical positivism and the verifiability criterion of meaning, and explain again why it's wrong. And I also put some key quotes on the subject to Avengers music, because Avengers music goes with anything. That's all. Thank you for watching.